we've got to get my my system up and working, but I'm going to give you a day in the life of Isagenix. Now I'm going to, oh, what a story to tell. What a story to tell. Kathy Cooper was a dental hygienist. She was a dental hygienist. Put that one up, that's it. Great. This is the inside of Kathy Cooper's new Rolls Royce. She was struggling, and now this is her room. That's it. Thank you. Okay. And what I want to say is, you don't have to be an extraordinary person. You have to mix with extraordinary people. And therefore you start to do extraordinary things. And that is how you become extraordinary. Michael Barker will tell you, he's like, I don't know how many Dans you are, but he is, don't mess with this guy. He is way up there because he's mixed with the right people. He's got the right information. And that's the most important thing. You know, I've been a scientist for more than 50 years, 52 years. And I've worked with some of the best scientists in the world. And I was very fortunate. I started to work with athletes to get that last little bit of performance out of them, and then a whole flood of Olympians and other people came to me. And I went, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing, so I went to the best people and I learned from them. And that's what you have to do. And that's really what Isagenix is about. And I've been very pleased. I didn't join the company until, I joined in their Isagenix advisory board until May 2011. Although Warren's friend and mine, Jimmy Smith, had been at me since 2005 to do it. And finally Warren and Jimmy came to Salt Spring Island, where I live, and said, you've got to do this. You've got to try it. I said, no, I've got a good job. I was working for Big Pharma. And I resisted it quite a lot. But when I got in there, when I actually went to Isagenix, I found that a number of my old scientific friends were already there. They'd been smarter than me. And, you know, we are in a crisis. Now, I've got a friend who's head of the Cleveland Clinic. He was the guy who was head of the Human Genome Project. He's called Dr. Del Cosgrove, and he's now president and CEO of the Cleveland Clinic, a great surgeon. And I wanted to show you just what he wrote to me on the 9th of May. That's 2 days ago. We have to be really careful about what we put in our mouths. We're gorging ourselves into chronic disease, the costs of which will overwhelm us. 2 new studies on the devastating effects of poor nutrition by researchers at the Cleveland Clinic have just been reported in the New England Journal of Medicine and Nature. Anything we can do to reduce this avalanche of heart disease, cancer, and diabetes will not only give us longer and happier lives, it will help our children and grandchildren, who will ultimately have to pay the cost for our poor choices. That's 2 days ago. And he is one of Barack Obama's chief advisors on health. So we know, I don't have to go into all the evidence, we know that we have made a hell of a mess of it. We have allowed manufacturers to distort our food supply, and then, having distorted it, to claim that it's the best food on earth. And that's why 2/3 of America is overweight. People are not naturally fat. They get fat because they've been given the wrong information. And 2/3 of America, and nearly 2/3 of Canada, are now overweight. That's extraordinary misinformation. You know, most of the things you get from most of the weight loss programs on this planet are the t-shirt. That's all you get. And I've seen it so many times. And it's not just the nutrition. We have destroyed our environment. We have absolutely messed with our environment so much. You know, 2011 and 2012, the American Lung Association published reports that American air is now worse than it's ever been. In 1976, the EPA was formed, the Environmental Protection Agency was formed to clean it up. And it's now worse than it's ever been. And they were using the EPA's own figures. I went through the figures for Canada. 2002 to 2009 is all I could get. And in every major city, especially Vancouver, the ozone and particulate matters went up and up and up. You know, a lot of people talk about going green and saving the planet, but nobody does very much about it. So you have to save yourself. Government is not going to do it for you. In fact, I have a lovely quote that I must pull out from Barack Obama. What Washington needs is adult supervision. And then we might get it right, you know. Otherwise, we are not going to do it. You have to take care of yourself. And I want to tell you, it's very important for you to take care of yourself, because we have made such advances in science now, such amazing advances, that you are going to live a very long time. And if you don't want to spend the last 20 years of your life in continual, torturous reduction of symptoms, then you look after yourself now while you've still got your health. And I can say this because I'm 74, and I didn't look after myself before, but now I do. And so, but unfortunately, most people, they don't look after themselves. And the reason is that they suspect everything. They suspect government, they suspect everything they see on the media, they suspect everything they see on TV, they suspect every program that comes down the pike. And so they do nothing. And you know, the days stretch into weeks, and the weeks stretch into months, and the months into years, and suddenly you are dying in a darkened room, and you wonder, where did all the time go? Why didn't I do something? Now, I can say this because I was dying in a darkened room. And I just, by hook or by crook, I got out of it. But people are searching for just the right place, and they do not know what to believe. And one of the reasons I joined Isagenix is I want people to know what to believe. I want to be able to advise people that you can get rid of the weight of the world. You can get freedom from financial and physical pain, which is Isagenix's goal. You can do this. What it requires is the right information. And no, it's exactly what I was saying about Michael before. He's become an absolute expert in martial arts because he follows the right information. He goes to the right people. He sees the people that do it a little bit better than he does, and he learns that. And that's the only way to do it. Believe me, when I was a scientist in New Zealand, at the University of Auckland Medical School, I got the best advice in the world from one of my friends who was at Rockefeller University. He said, go everywhere, see the best people, talk to them, get a little bit of knowledge. You can't do it by sitting in your office in Auckland University and reading books. You can't do it. And so I did it, and it's been an amazing journey. And Isagenix is part of that journey, and I was astounded when I went there and I found that it had these scientists. It had Dr. Paul Anderson, who's been a friend of mine for 25 years. He never told me he was going to Isagenix. It had David Despain. David Despain is their chief of scientific communications. He was a child. He used to play with my daughters when they were such wee-high. And he told me, I went to college and studied nutrition because of you. And I couldn't believe it. And then John Anderson. John Anderson is a genius that I've known about and followed for more than 30 years. And then there was Bill Andrews. When Jim Coover told me first that Bill Andrews was working with them on a program, I didn't believe him. And I said to him, oh, that's very unlikely. Because this guy's a world-class telomere scientist. And I studied telomere since 1981. And I studied with Elizabeth Blackburn. and her and Jack Sozak and Carol Greider got the Nobel Prize in 2009 for their work on telomeres. I'll come to that in a minute. It's very important work. Because, you know, in the... I stopped a lot of the work that I used to do with... I used to have a clinic on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood. My wife and I, my wonderful wife back there, who is also a scientist, and whom I defer to all the time. No, I'm telling you, no matter how much I study Hell's Kitchen and Gordon Ramsay, and I'll always be sous chef in our house. And you know, I've never had control of the remote. I've only had occasional visiting rights. You should sell. And the worst part about it is, you know, I think I've done pretty well after dinner, and then she comes out and restacks the dishwasher. She said, for an international scientist, you're hopeless at the science of stacking dishwashers. Oh, I see a couple of nods here. Well, anyway. So, around about 2000, things started to change radically. By 2003, things had changed dramatically. Del Cosgrove and the 1,200 or so scientists around the world that were working on the Human Genome Project finally got it done quicker than they thought they would. And that sort of changed the game. And then the work on telomeres came out, and that changed the game too. And I'll come to that in a minute, but think about it. Isagenix has got the team, it's got the contacts, it's got the people to use the future science now. Use the future science we are developing in our labs, but to use it now, today. And that's my great gift from Isagenix is they are going to use it without charging the earth for it. Because if I'd stayed where I was, in Big Pharma, and I had gone on developing my work, you wouldn't hear a word about it. But 5 years down the road, maybe, it would come out, and it would be the best and newest and super thing, and it would be 100 times the cost of what Isagenix is charging. And that's still going to happen, even though Isagenix has brought stuff out. So I'm very pleased to be able to deliver the science that we are doing now to people today, because it is not the same. You think it's, oh yes, well right, you know, you're going to lose a bit of weight, you're going to maybe go and do some exercise, you're going to be careful with what you eat, you're going to have filtered water, you're going to go and get your multivitamin from the drugstore. Those things won't cut it. They're nothing to do with what we've got. Nothing. Yeah, they're part, they're part of what we do, but they are not secrets. The secrets are what I'm going to show you. First one is the cleansing system that Isagenix has got. We now have destroyed our environment so much that toxins are going into our bodies every day, even here in Kamloops, which I must say, when I flew in for the first time today, I was astounded by the beauty of the environment. It was gorgeous. It was gorgeous. And yet, when I live on Salt Spring Island, the reason that I went there from California was because of the clean air, clean food, clean water, organic growers, and all that stuff. Yet we can, on Salt Spring, measure the flow of chemical pollutants from Victoria every day. Every day. And that's 30 minutes away 20 minutes by float plane. An hour by car and ferry. So you've got to have a system that's very, very simple that you can use every day to clean the toxins out of your body. And the system doesn't clean the toxins. Your bodily systems clean the toxins. What it does is give them the optimum chance to work. And you can do that. You can go to a spa and you can spend $10,000 and you can get and they'll clean you up in a week. They'll take so many toxins out of you, you won't believe. When they show you what they've taken out of you, you won't want to look at it. But next day you're back home and you're breathing them all in again, you're eating them all again, you're being surrounded with them in your environment 24 hours a day. So you've got to have a system that's simple, that can optimize your own body's cleansing systems. And that's what Isagenix has. It's a very old system. Very old system. It was used by Hippocrates. It was used by Hippocrates. The very similar system to what John Anderson brought out. And that's John's genius. You know, he looked at that system, he looked at the way that Hippocrates used it, and then Galen used it in the Middle Ages, the top physician of his time, and then other physicians coming up to the 20th century, and he said, this works. And he produced it, and it's the cleanse for life. And there's so many testimonials, I can't go through them, but it does change your health. If you use it regularly, you get health so vibrant, you can't even talk about it. And then there's the second thing is, what are we made of? What are all the operating units in our body? They're all proteins. Every single operating unit in your body is a protein. All your enzymes are proteins. Your hemoglobin is a protein. All your antibodies are proteins. Everything, all your beams and rafters are all made of proteins. Your brain, all the neurons in your brain work on proteins. They're all made, all of their operating units inside them are proteins. So you see, well, let's put it quick, simple. Garbage in, garbage out. If you put garbage proteins in, your body can only make garbage proteins. It can't make anything else. And it will struggle along, you know, it's pretty tough. The system's pretty tough. You go and bang your head on the concrete out there, you can recover from it, but it doesn't do you any good. And therefore, I was looking for a company that had a system of proteins that I used with the athletes. And I was very, very surprised when I went to Phoenix and took away the proteins and examined them in my own lab, and I rang up Jim Coover, the owner of Isagenix, and said, I know where this protein comes from. And he said, oh yeah? And I told him exactly, because it has a signature, chemical signature. And it's the very same protein that I advised in 1993 in my book, The Right Protein for Muscle and Strength. It's in New Zealand, undenatured, cold extracted protein from animals that are fed the way they should be out on the range, and that are not forced into milk, that actually are rotated into milk, which is the old way of doing it, the way that all of us used to do it before NPK fertilizers came along and wiped out the economy of cattle on the range. That's why you don't see cattle on the range. Very seldom, only special like on my farm. Because it's not economic. It's easier to grow corn, soybeans, wheat, because you can grow them all on NPK fertilizers, which were made from the remnants of munitions for the Second World War. They had mountains of this stuff, mountains of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So some bright guy in about 1949 said, why don't we make this into fertilizer? We'll grow everything and give it to the farmers at like a very low cost. And that's exactly what happened to American agribusiness. And a lot of Canadian too, unfortunately. So I was very pleased to find isolene protein being used, because it's the same protein I advised. And it's the same protein I've used with many Olympians. And that's a brilliant thing. That's another of John Anderson's brilliant notions. He follows what works. And that's not really Kathy Cooper, but it looks good. The other thing that I always used was adaptogens for athletes. Ever since Yuri Gagarin first went up as a Soviet cosmonaut, I used adaptogens with athletes, because adaptogens are what kept Yuri Gagarin in space when the American astronauts could not stay in space. And that's because of the effects of the space station going around the Earth every 45 minutes or so are disastrous on the human body, absolutely disastrous. So you have to have something that mitigates the stress. And Jim Coover went to, at the fall of the Soviet Union, he went to Russia and brought out the man who was responsible for the use of the adaptogens in space. And that's how he learned about them. And that's how John started to incorporate them and make this great supplement, Ionic Supreme. Now, I could go into it in many, many details, but you can read all about that. That's not the important thing. The important thing is that we've got it. It's part of the system. And also, we've got this terrific multi. Now you think, oh yeah, well, multis are multis are multi. You know, you see them on TV every day. They're not. Some multiple vitamin minerals are very different. And a lot of people, even some of my physician friends, you know, they say, we don't need them. Just eat right. Just eat right. And I look at somebody who's 30 pounds overweight, who's a physician, and I say to him, oh, and you eat right? I said, well, not really. So Isagenix has produced an extremely good daily essentials for men and for women. And I like it very much. I like the amount of vitamin D in it. They put in more vitamin D. And by the way, most people in Canada are low in vitamin D. And they put in a marine omega-3 fatty acids, which is the right type of omega-3 fatty acid, long chain, not short chain like come from vegetable oils. So, and there's many other things, but I won't even go into those. I want to, you can read all about that, and it sort of gets tedious and scientific, and then I go off on my own, and I'll close my eyes, and then everyone will go to sleep. But I want to get to the crux of some things. Isagenix has got an irresistible elegance of design in the product. This is product B, and Bill Andrews partnered with Isagenix to produce this for telomere support. Now I can tell you this is future science right now, available right now. I've studied this since 1981. When I first went, I went to see Bill. I sat, when Jim Cooper arranged for me to have dinner with him, I sat and I looked across the dinner table at him and I said, Bill, what do you think? And he said, oh, I know. It's a botanical supplement. It couldn't be strong enough, could it? I said, well, that's what I think. He said, let me show you. And he showed me all his figures. And I went to his lab and it was like, I'm in heaven here. This is a fundamental breakthrough. You do not realize that telomeres are the end caps on your chromosomes to protect your DNA. And we knew, all the science stuff, for 35 years, I knew as a scientist, an anti-aging scientist, that all of the people out there with all these systems like standing on your head and drinking this much water or taking these raw foods or anything, and it will live to 120, 130, they were all talking nonsense because the telomeres, every time your cells divide, your telomeres get chopped off a bit. So by the time you're about 80 to 90, there's a little variation, 80 to 90, most people are done. Their telomeres are too short, they can't protect the DNA anymore, your own defense systems go in and kill your own DNA. And when you see people suddenly decline, who appear to be in great health, but over a few months they decline and die, that's what happens. That's what happens. That's old age, it's dying of old age. But once we worked this out, like Bill Andrews did some essential work for it. The reason he wasn't considered for the Nobel Prize is he worked for a commercial company. And commercial companies don't get Nobel Prizes. So, but the three who did, he worked with them. Jack Sozak, Elizabeth Blackburn, and Carol Greider. And there was one other person, Maria Blasco, who was an assistant in Carol Greider's lab. Now, I never even got to speak to Madame Carol Greider. She was too high up, but I did get to speak to Maria. And she was very, very smart. And she's now head of the Spanish Cancer Center, Spanish Cancer Institute. And she's probably one of the leading telomere experts in the world, along with Bill and Elizabeth and Carol and Jack. They produced this, Bill Andrews and John Anderson, and have got an induction of telomerase, the enzyme that is critical for protecting the telomeres, the end caps on the chromosomes. Now, they've only done it in the test tube, but the thing that really, really attracted me to Isagenix was that Maria Blasco, one of the best in the world, agreed to do the human testing. And that's on the way right now. And I'm hoping that it comes out positive, because this is the science of the future. Once we can stop the deterioration of the telomeres, then it opens the gate to a very large extension of human life. And believe me, that is going to happen. It's going to happen. That's why I say most of the people in this room will live much longer than you expect. So you better look after yourself. It's not nice to be living in a wheelchair. And finally, I come to my bit. I know I've been studying the brain for a long time, and with a lot of other scientists. And we didn't know anything much about it for many, many years. We didn't. And now, I think about it was 1997, when Peter Erickson and Rusty Gage at the Salk Institute showed that human brains could grow new neurons. That all the textbooks were wrong, that you didn't get a complement of brain cells at birth and then they gradually declined over life, which is what we had been taught, but that you could grow new ones. And now it's a huge science. And that's the second big breakthrough that we've got, and that Isagenix has got to offer you to maximize your longevity and to optimize the system that you have in your body, which is a brilliant system. Brilliant system, if only we know how to optimize it. And those two secrets, one is the telomeres, and the other is neurogenesis in the brain. And those are available right now, right now. Now, I want to tell you how important that is, and so I'm going to actually quote from a couple of people, because most people don't really believe this. Maybe I'm not. Oh yes, you're right. Yes, this is for Dr. Stephen Finkbeiner. He's professor of neurology at the University of California, I know, in San Francisco, and he's writing in the top journal, Nature. Neurodegeneration of the brain is the 6th leading cause of death in the US. The market for disease-modifying drugs is enormous, but no drug exists. There is no effective treatment for once neurodegeneration has caught hold of you. There's no treatment. Now, in July 2011, in the leading journal Psychiatry, neurologists at the Mayo Clinic, they gave you this blunt conclusion. Currently, there is no effective treatment to stop neurodegeneration. In March 2011, Barack Obama passed the National Alzheimer's Protection, acknowledging there's no effective treatment, and setting out $100 million a year in research funds to find a treatment by 2025. Now I want to ask you, how many people here can wait till 2025?
No, thanks.
No, I don't think, I definitely can't. So we really can't afford to wait. But, and the National Institutes of Health, by the way, have changed their criteria. In 2011, after 27 years of procrastination, of resisting the evidence, the National Institutes of Health admitted there's no cure for memory loss once it has occurred. No cure. Just think of that. All the drugs that people have at the moment, they don't work. Don't work. And they've changed their focus now to prevention. Here's what they said. Alzheimer's begins years, if not decades, before it shows. And that's when we should be treating it. And they, at the same time, reported that 50% of all Americans alive today will spend their latter years in nursing homes, unable to care for themselves. Not because they can't walk, not because they can't move, but because they can't think anymore. And that is the key thing. Your brain controls everything. Every move you make, everything. One of the reasons I've studied it so much is it controls every athletic movement. I've studied one of the things that we built into this brain boost and renewal is something that helps the brain increase its speed. Now, I don't want you to take my word for it. I really don't want anybody to take my word for this. What I would like people to do, how many people here have used the Brain Boost? Okay, so there's a lot that haven't. What I'd like you to do is to go online, go to a site completely independent from Isagenix, it's called Lumosity, and get your brain profile now, as it is today. And then follow the Lumosity site and do some practice, and you'll get a certain line of improvement, because there is a practice effect, obviously, in all of these brain stimulation exercises. And then after 60 days, start to take the Brain Boost and Renewal and Sleep Support, and watch the curve of that line go up like that. Do it yourself. Don't take my word for it. Do it yourself. I can say this with confidence now because our first clinical trial was so successful, done apart from me and apart from Isagenix, done independently, University of Arizona, was so successful that Jim Coover, we were not going to bring it out till the end of this year. He said, that's good enough, we're going to bring it out. And in August 2012, we brought out the Brain Boost and Sleep Support. Yes?
Where were the controls in that experiment?
Oh, they had a control group, yes.
No, but what was kept as
there's many things tested. There was brain speed, there was flexibility, there was memory, there was problem solving, and attention.
No, but what I'm asking is that
we're going to actually have a Q&A session later on.
You can take that to the Q&A session because there's a lot to it. But that's what I want. I don't want you to take Isagenix word for it. I don't want you to take my word for it. I want you to test your own brain and see. Now I can do this, say this now because I've had hundreds since August last year when people started to use it. I've had hundreds of people who've done exactly this. And so I'll give you one example. It's a businessman in San Diego, a businessman in Vancouver, and he said to me, okay, I'll do it. And he came back to me and said, oh, I don't like this test. He said, I came out at the 51st percentile, which means I'm dead average. And he thought he was really a good businessman. And I said, well, try it. So he went along and he did the 60 days, and he went up to the 64th percentile. And then he was sort of pleased with that, but he thought, oh, well, 64th percentile, that means that 63 people out of every 100 are worse than you are. And then he started to use the Brain Boost and Renewal. Now he's at the 84th percentile, and the line of his improvement went up like that. And now he's really so pleased with it. He says, I'm making better business decisions. It's rubbed off on everybody. I feel more calm at home. Lots of things. But I have hundreds of reports like that. So that's one thing. The second thing is that you can't do the brain without having the sleep. And 1/3 of Americans and a very large number of Canadians, the government won't admit how many, do not sleep well. They do not get sufficient sleep. They can't sleep. They can't get deep sleep. They wake up during the night. They just have a terrible time. 1/3 of the physiological functions of your life are controlled by your sleep. All your recovery, almost all the neurogenesis in your brain, all of the growth of your organs, all of the improvement in athletic performance, all of the improvement in strength, they all occur during the sleep cycle. You don't get sufficient sleep or deep enough sleep, you are never going to express your optimum, ever, ever. I mean, everybody probably